Welcome to my next stories.
Cindy carried Dagon toward Hagerstown to meet up with the princess on their journey. Cindy recalled what she and Dagon spoke about last night. The trip to Hagerstown would be a long one. It would take about a week to get there, and there were a lot of giantess roaming around that area, and that was during a normal time of the year. Cindy couldn't help but worry for her brother. Ever since her mother passed away, she only had Dagon. If something happened to him, well, she didn't know what she would do. Just be careful, Dagon, Cindy reminded him as they got closer to the town where they would be meeting the princess to escort. Dagon laughed. You worry too much, everything will be fine. I made this trip many times before I met you. Cindy gave him a stern look at his childish disregard to his safety. I'm serious, if something were to happen to you. Dagon quickly changed his demeanor and suddenly realized how much she worried about him. You're right, I should take this more serious. Cindy laughed and poked Dagon in the chest, knocking him over in her hand. How else am I expected to eat tiger, without you? I need someone to attract them to me or I wouldn't be able to catch them. So don't be going and getting into trouble, it's hard to just live on fruits and plants. Dagon sat up shaking his head. Between the two of us you could cut back on the meat, you're starting to get fat. Dagon mumbled. I heard that, Cindy growled at him. I might just have to eat you myself one of these days. Dagon laughed. You can try, but I'm sure I would give you the worst stomachache ever. Cindy nodded. You're right, your smell alone is making me sick to my stomach. Cindy's face twisted into a disgusted look. What? Dagon said, hurt. Do you mean that? Do I really smell? Cindy laughed but didn't answer his question, leaving him begging her to tell him that she was lying. Olivia stood outside the gates to the city with her personal guard. Her father wasn't going to see her off. Olivia couldn't be more upset. She was being transported like some goods to another town to get married to someone she never even knew. Olivia had no say in it and her father didn't seem to care much about her own opinion. Yet things could be worse. She could be leaving all her friends behind. She would have laughed at this if it didn't hurt so much at the fact that she wouldn't really be missing much from this town except her father, and even then, Olivia would have ranted more in her head if it weren't for the man who was supposed to guide them safely to Luther's town just showed up. He didn't seem like much, in fact it was hard to believe that he took down those tigers. He must have stole them from someone. Olivia continued to project her hatred at Dagon. As Dagon came up to them he frowned at the massive group of people at the front of the gate. What's going on? There's no way all of you are coming, Dagon told the crowd of people. Dagon looked on the faces of over the 12 guards and the princess. We are the Princess Royal Guards, the man from the other day said. Dagon looked furious. When you said Royal Guards I thought you meant like 2 or 3 at most. Not. Dagon waved to the rest, her personal army. Dagon lifted his right hand up to his forehead and started to rub it like he had a headache forming. Look, Dagon said as he tried to remember the guard's name. Kevin, he said, not amused with Dagon's outburst. Kevin, Dagon repeated. It's one thing to travel in small numbers safely from town to town, but with this many people, we're just asking to get noticed. We won't let any harm befall the princess, Kevin replied as the rest of the guard stood at attention and agreed with their captain. Dagon shook his head as he backed away, rubbing his temple. This is a bad idea, he mumbled to himself. He started to pace around. Olivia watched confused at how he was acting and was wondering if he would back out of their agreement. Olivia felt surprised as she realized that she won't be able to leave and she would have to stay. Alright, hurry up and grab your gear, Dagon finally said, dashing Olivia's hope away. Men, get information, Kevin said as the rest of the guards fell into a shape around the princess. They formed a circle around her, preventing Olivia from seeing much outside the wall of armor that stood tall. Move out, Kevin shouted as they marched. Olivia heard Dagon's aggravated voice speak up, for goodness sake try and not make so much noise. I want to be able to spend my money. Olivia rolled her eyes at his words. Of course he only saw her as a great sum of money and not a human being. All her life no one saw her as a person, why should he? Olivia walked forward as the circle of troops walked her toward Luther's town. Dagon groaned as he led his party into the woods on the path to Luther's town. His footsteps were silent and precise, Yet it meant nothing if there was a loud clanking and stomping sound coming from behind him, giving away his position to everything within a mile radius. He was lucky that they weren't ambushed by giantesses the first 10 minutes of their journey. Dagon looked behind him and groaned again at what he saw. The soldiers were all looking ahead on the path to make sure nothing was in front of them, and not behind or out to the sides of the forest where normally travels were attacked from. They were going to get him killed. "Okay, we need to stop," Dagon told everyone. "Is everything okay?" Olivia called out from behind the ring of soldiers at the sudden stop. "Everything's fine, Princess," Dagon called out. "It's just a break." As the troops broke up to take a rest and guard the princess, Dagon walked over to Kevin to talk with him. "We need to talk." Kevin didn't seem pleased but listened to him anyway. "You need to have your people looking out. I can't watch everything. When I worked for the army and transport, we had men posted as lookouts. I need someone watching the left and right sides of the roads and another watching our backs." Not seeming very pleased being told what to do, Kevin nodded. "I understand. Oh, and if you can try and not make as much noise marching, that would divine," Dagon added. Kevin glared at Dagon. "I'll see what I can do." "Great," Dagon said. "Now if you excuse me, I'm going to scout out the area. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Cindy heard a twig snap off to her right, causing her to spin around and spot who it was. It was her brother Dagon. "Geez bro, didn't anyone tell you not to sneak up on a giantess?" "Sorry, was checking up on you." "You're not having any trouble following us, are you?" Dagon asked. Cindy let out an annoyed sigh. "It's too easy. With all the noise you're making." Dagon looked upset. "It's not me. I know what to do, it's those stupid guards. They're going to get us into danger. Just promise me that at the first sign of danger you leave," Cindy told him. Dagon laughed. "Don't worry, I'm no idiot. Trust me, I'll be gone way before any giantess appear. There's no way I'm getting caught by them." Cindy snorted. "You better not. Don't expect me to come rescue you if you get caught." "That hurts," Dagon joked. "You wouldn't help your own brother?" Cindy gave him a sinister look. "Oh, I might help." She leaned forward so her face was obscuring Dagon's vision. "I would help them devour you," Cindy said as she opened her mouth as wide as possible and moved forward to capture Dagon in her mouth. Dagon started to protest. No, stop," he shouted as he fell back on his back, trying to avoid his giant sister's maw. Cindy burst into laughter and rolled over on her back. "Oh God, that never stops being funny," she said between her giggles. "Oh man." She continued to snicker at Dagon. "Oh haha," Dagon said peeved. "You know that isn't getting any funnier." Still Cindy continued to laugh at him. "Whatever," Dagon said as he walked away, "just don't get spotted by the guards." "Oh come on," Cindy said, trying not to laugh. "Let me get a nibble or just one lick." She burst into another fit of giggles. Olivia stood up when she saw Dagon come back out of the forest and on the dirt patch that he called a road. He was gone for a while, but her guards didn't seem to think any of it. "Where did you go?" Olivia said, unaware of the sound in her voice. Dagon paused as the princess demanded to know where he went. It was like she thought he was one of her servants to be kept track of. Turning to her, he arched an eyebrow at how she spoke to him. "I'm sorry, princess, but someone needs to make sure that you stay alive. I figured that your father didn't want to waste 400,000 on his precious gift to King Ursa. Now if you excuse me, I need to transport you to Lutherstown." Olivia's face grew red with rage at the insults that he caused her. But before she could do anything, her guards formed in around her, blocking him from her view. She never felt more humiliated in her life. She heard that bastard speaking to Kevin. "Make sure your men keep watch like I said. Let's move, I want to get a lot further than this before nightfall." With that they started their march further into the woods. Melody reached down toward the man running toward a group of other little men. They all wore some kind of shiny clothing that they called armor and were forming a circle around the supplies that they were guarding. Melody and a small group of giantess caught them on the road to one of the cities nearby and attacked them. Melody picked up the man with ease and held on to him as he shouted for his release. The other men backed away, scared of what was to come next. Melody didn't even hesitate as she opened her mouth and held the screaming man over her mouth. She dropped him in her mouth and started to slather him in her saliva. Most giantess enjoyed munching on the little people, but Melody found that swallowing them whole felt more filling and seemed to keep her full longer. With much practice, Melody swallowed her prey with great ease, enjoying the tingling sensation trailing down her throat to her empty gut. It felt wonderful feeling that large bulge make its way down her esophagus and stretching it out just slightly enough to make her moan. When she finally felt the little man deposit into her flesh sack of no escape, she focused on the other men. There was a decent amount of them. Between the other 3 giantess there was plenty for them all to enjoy their fill. Closing the distance between the giantess and the little frightened men, Melody made sure that they cut off any escape paths that they might run to. One of the little men shouted to his fellow men that Melody didn't make out. Suddenly the men stopped looking so frightened and pulled out weapons. Before Melody could see what the weapons were, there was loud banging noises rapidly going off. Terrified by the noise, Melody quickly raised up her hands in a defensive shield. There were sharp stinging pains that ran up and down her arms. When the noise stopped, she removed her arms to notice that there was trickling streams of red blood dripping down her arms along with stinging pains from the wounds. Shocked at this, she looked down at the closest soldier and spotted the weapon used. He had a rifle. This was the first time Melody ever saw a gun. She heard about them but never thought that she would see one, let alone 20 of them. She looked at her fellow giantess and noticed some weren't as lucky as she was. One of them had blood from a couple wounds on her cheek and forehead. Another one was possible the luckiest of them all and managed to only get a few marks on her arm. Melody looked to the last one in the group and gasped. Brenda didn't move fast enough and took the shot straight to the face. Either the men were lucky or Brenda was very unlucky, but a cluster of shoots made a hole through her head, killing her. Brenda just stood there looking as shocked as all of them, men and giantess. Brenda started to fall backwards and landed with a loud thud, causing all the men to bounce up in the air. Melody looked at her fallen comrade and back to the other survivors who didn't know what to do. Melody saw one of the men smile at the accomplishment. "You bastards," Melody yelled as she charged forward to get revenge. The other giantess followed her as they all rushed the ones responsible for the death of their fellow sister. The men were petrified as they quickly tried to reload their guns before they were killed. They were way too slow. Melody took her foot and kicked a group of them, sending 4 of them flying in a spray of blood. Not stopping, she quickly used her other foot to crush another one and then went to town as her fellow giantess attacked with as much anger as she did. There was screaming and wailing as body parts went flying as they all tore into the murders. Somewhere in the haze of Melody's rage, one of the giantess told them all to stop. Melody heard this and paused as she was squeezing the life out of one of the soldiers, feeling his body liquefy into a goo and oozing out of her fingers. Melody realized there were only 6 left, huddled in a small circle surrounded by Melody and the other 2 giantess. "I'm quite famished from all this fun I'm having," said the giantess whose face had the bullet wounds still bleeding. Now her feet were covered in blood to match the blood on her face. "Me too," said the other giantess, who gave the frightened men a hungering look. She slowly licked her lips as she closed in on them. "Well then, let's dig in," Melody replied as she reached forward and grabbed one of the men cowering. He screamed and begged for mercy, but Melody didn't care. She quickly threw him into her mouth and started to wet him for his journey to her gut. As the other giantess reached for their meals too, Melody said with a mouthful, "Don't chew, let them digest." Melody gulped down her prey, showing the others what to do. They laughed evilly as they followed Melody's example. Melody took pleasure with the muffled cries coming from her meal as it joined her first mouthful. Her stomach was making a small bulge from the 2 whole men in her gut. She wasn't sure if the squirming she was feeling was from the man she just ate or if the other one was still alive and squirming too. She didn't care, it felt good. Purring with pleasure, she reached for another man. This one tried fighting her, but she didn't even feel his fist pounding on her fingers. Wanting to tease him, she brought him up to her stomach and rubbed him up against it. "You feel that? Do you hear them begging for their lives? That's going to be you." Melody pressed him up against her gut a little hard, delighting in feeling him struggle for air. She then pulled him away and brought him toward her mouth. Opening her jaw, she tilted her head back and started to lower him. "Oh God, no," he shouted as he kicked his feet as they passed her teeth. Melody held back her laughter for joy as she felt his feet hit her tongue. She quickly opened her throat wide open as she kept lowering him until his legs went into her throat. Melody let go of him as he screamed and quickly descended into the dark slimy hole to meet his friends. Melody gagged as she felt him get caught in her throat. Gulping, Melody brought her hands up to her throat and helped push down the bothersome meal until she felt him plop down in her awaiting gut. Oh, ooh, that's good, she purred again as she felt the flailing of her meal. She patted her gut, feeling the jumble of body parts compressed to her smacks on her belly. Enjoy your hell, Melody teased as she looked to the others who were just finishing their last prey too. Melody felt bloated from the meal. When they were all finished, they all had pleased looks on their face. With full guts and revenge taken, the giantess headed off on their own. Melody headed back to where she lived, feeling the men start to slow down their struggles. Upset at their lack of movement, she tried something new. She gulped down some air. Melody felt her stomach expand even more as it gurgled and growled from the ingestion of oxygen. She felt the urge to burp but refrained from doing so. Suddenly her stomach felt the joyous tingling sensation of her little men trying to escape. Chuckling at this new trick that she just learned, she patted her gut again. "Squirm for me," Melody mumbled in pleasure as she sat down under one of the large trees and reached her hand down past her waist. Melody closed her eyes at the wonderful feeling that ran through her body from stomach and from her love cave. Maybe she should have kept one or two alive, Melody thought in her bliss. She was feeling so horny right now, but that was understandable. It was in fact mating season after all.